The observation post hung in the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, a silent watcher that had recorded every radio signal, every television broadcast, and every military test that Earth had produced for the past 200 years. Inside the Galactic Council's monitoring station, Commander Vorin reviewed the data for what felt like the 1,000th time. The blue-green world spinning peacefully in the holographic display seemed so fragile, so utterly unprepared for what was coming. Earth had been chattering into the void for centuries now, announcing its presence to anyone who cared to listen. They had split atoms, launched primitive chemical rockets, and even sent small probes to their neighboring planets. By all Council standards, they were in the early stages of technological development. They had no faster-than-light communications, no plasma shield technology, and no antimatter reactors. Their most powerful weapons were still based on controlled nuclear fission, technology that most galactic civilizations had abandoned 10,000 years ago. Vorin sighed and transmitted his final report to the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. His conclusion was simple and matched every analysis before it. Earth was defenseless by galactic standards. The humans were alone, primitive, and completely unaware that they lived in a universe filled with thousands of other civilizations. Across the galaxy, in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Krell of the Zrathi Empire stood before the gathered representatives. His chitinous armor gleamed under the chamber lights as he made his petition. The Zrathi had been expanding their territory for 3 centuries, always careful to follow Council protocols. They claimed uninhabited worlds, colonized dead systems, and occasionally absorbed primitive species who could not defend themselves. Now Krell wanted Earth. The holographic display showed humanity's homeworld rotating slowly as Krell presented his case. The humans had no seats on the Council. They had never made contact with any galactic civilization. They broadcast their presence freely, showing either ignorance or arrogance. By Council law, any species that could not defend its territorial claims could be classified as unclaimed territory. The vote took less than an hour. Representatives from 47 different species cast their approval. A few abstained, but none voted against the measure. Earth was officially designated as unclaimed territory, open for colonization by the Zrathi Empire. The Council registered the claim in its central database and moved on to other matters. For them, it was just another routine decision in the endless administration of galactic affairs. 3 weeks later, the Zrathi colonization fleet entered the Sol system. Fleet Commander Thras stood on the bridge of the warship Inevitable Conquest, watching the star called Sol grow brighter on the main view screen. Behind his flagship, 46 other vessels maintained perfect formation. It was a substantial force, more than enough to claim a primitive world. Thras had commanded colonization missions before, and they always followed the same pattern. The fleet would arrive, broadcast demands for surrender, and the native species would either comply or resist briefly before their inferior technology failed them. The fleet crossed Neptune's orbit without incident. Their sensors swept through the system, cataloging everything they detected. Gas giants, rocky inner planets, a surprisingly large moon orbiting the 3rd planet, and countless small asteroids. They found the expected signs of primitive civilization, satellites in orbit around Earth, a small space station, and what appeared to be abandoned equipment on the moon. Everything matched the observation data perfectly. Thras ordered his communications officer to broadcast the standard surrender demand on all frequencies. The message was simple and had been translated into the dominant human languages. The Zrathi Empire now claimed this system. All human vessels were to power down immediately. All military installations were to stand down. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force, but cooperation would be rewarded with fair treatment under Zrathi administration. The message transmitted across the system at light speed. Thras settled into his command chair and waited for the response. It usually took anywhere from several minutes to a few hours, depending on how organized the primitive species was. Some surrendered immediately. Others attempted to negotiate. A few tried to fight, but those conflicts typically ended within hours. This time, there was only silence. The communications officer checked his equipment, confirmed the message had been transmitted correctly, and sent it again. Still nothing. The humans were not responding at all. Thras found this mildly annoying but not unexpected. Perhaps they were in shock, or maybe their leadership was arguing about what to do. He had encountered silent responses before, usually from species too terrified to reply. The fleet continued its approach, crossing the orbit of Uranus and then Saturn. Still no response from Earth. Thros ordered a detailed scan of the human homeworld. The sensors showed cities, industrial centers, farmland, and oceans. Everything looked peaceful. There were no signs of military mobilization, no defensive satellites moving into position, no warships launching from the planet's surface. As the fleet passed Jupiter, Thros began to feel confident. The humans were not going to resist. They probably lacked even the most basic space military capability. This would be the easiest colonization mission of his career. He had brought 47 warships to claim a world that appeared to have no defenses at all. The silence from Earth continued as the Zrathi fleet crossed the asteroid belt. Thros ordered his ships to battle formation anyway, following standard procedure. The warships spread out into a three-dimensional attack pattern, ready to respond to any threats. But their sensors showed nothing. No human vessels, no defensive installations, no weapons platforms. Mars passed to their starboard side, its red surface reflecting the distant sunlight. Thros pulled up the tactical display and studied the space between his fleet and Earth. Empty. Completely empty except for a few human satellites that posed no threat whatsoever. He allowed himself a small smile. The Council had been right to approve this claim. The humans were defenseless. On Earth, billions of humans went about their daily lives unaware that an alien fleet was approaching their world. They drove to work, attended schools, watched entertainment programs, and argued about politics. Some astronomers noticed unusual readings in deep space, but these were dismissed as sensor errors or natural phenomena. The world's military forces maintained their normal routines, monitoring each other rather than watching the stars. In the silent darkness between Mars and Earth, something waited. No radio signals gave away its position. No heat signatures marked its location. No visible light reflected from its surface. It simply existed in the cold vacuum, invisible to the approaching Zrathi fleet. Thros checked the chronometer. They would reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 hours. He planned to position his fleet around the planet, make another surrender demand, and then wait. If the humans still refused to respond, he would begin with a demonstration of power. A few missile strikes on uninhabited areas usually convinced primitive species that resistance was futile. The fleet commander had no way of knowing that Earth had been listening for 200 years. The humans had heard the galaxy's chatter, studied its signals, and learned its lessons. They had observed how civilizations announced themselves, how they broadcast their presence, and how those who made the most noise often died first. Earth had chosen silence. And in that silence, humanity had prepared for this exact moment. The Zrathi fleet crossed the orbit of Mars in perfect formation, and that was when everything changed. Lieutenant Sarix, the sensor operator aboard the inevitable Conquest, stared at her display with growing confusion. The readings made no sense. Where there had been empty space moments before, her instruments now showed gravitational anomalies. Massive gravitational anomalies. She ran a diagnostic check on her equipment, convinced there must be some malfunction. The diagnostic came back clean. The readings were real. Something enormous was moving in the darkness ahead. Objects that created gravitational distortions consistent with artificial structures of incredible mass. But her optical sensors showed nothing. Her thermal scanners detected no heat signatures. Her radio detection equipment heard only silence. Sarix reported the anomalies to Commander Thros. The fleet commander studied the sensor data with increasing irritation. His fleet had crossed most of the Sol system without detecting anything unusual, and now suddenly there were massive objects appearing on sensors? It had to be some kind of sensor error or perhaps unusual magnetic fields around Earth affecting their instruments. Then the objects began to move. All across the Zrathi fleet, sensor operators reported the same thing. The gravitational anomalies were changing position, spreading out into what appeared to be a defensive formation between the fleet and Earth. Thros ordered his tactical officer to calculate the size of the objects based on their gravitational signatures. When the numbers appeared on his display, he felt his blood temperature drop. Each object massed more than his entire flagship. There were at least 3 of them, possibly more. They were shaped roughly like elongated triangles, wider at one end and tapering to a point. The formation suggested military vessels, but that was impossible. The humans had no space navy. The Council's observation data had been clear on that point. Thros opened a channel to the rest of his fleet. All ships maintain formation but reduce speed. I want every sensor focused on those gravitational anomalies. Find out what we're dealing with. The Zrathi warships slowed their approach, and their sophisticated scanning equipment flooded the space ahead with every form of detection they possessed. Radar, LiDAR, thermal imaging, electromagnetic scanning, and even exotic particle detection systems worked simultaneously. Slowly, like ghosts materializing from fog, the outlines of 3 enormous vessels began to appear on their screens. They were unlike anything in the Zrathi database. The hulls were dark, covered in some material that absorbed sensor waves rather than reflecting them. They were massive, easily 3 times the size of the inevitable conquest. Their angular design suggested functionality over elegance, with surfaces that bristled with what could only be weapon emplacements. These were not exploration vessels or cargo ships. They were warships purpose-built for combat. Lieutenant Vex, Thros's tactical officer, studied the vessels with professional interest. "Commander, those ships are running almost completely dark. No radio emissions, minimal heat signature, no active scanning. They're using passive sensors only, and communicating through what appears to be tight-beam laser links. I've never seen anything like it." Thros felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. The humans had been broadcasting radio signals into space for 2 centuries. They had announced their presence to the entire galaxy. Why would they suddenly develop stealth technology, unless they had been planning for this exact scenario? The thought chilled him. Had the humans known the galaxy was watching? Had they deliberately appeared primitive while secretly building a space navy? It seemed impossible. Yet 3 massive warships now blocked his path to Earth, vessels that had somehow remained hidden until this moment. A communication request appeared on Thros's display. The source was one of the human vessels. He stared at the blinking indicator for several seconds, then accepted the connection. The view screen flickered and a human appeared. The being was smaller than a Zrathi, with smooth skin and binocular vision. It wore a dark uniform with insignia that Thros didn't recognize. The human spoke in clear, unaccented galactic standard. "Commander Thros of the Zrathi Empire, I am Admiral Marcus Cole of the United Earth Naval Service. You are hereby ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. You have 30 minutes to comply." Thros felt his mandibles click together in surprise. The human spoke perfect galactic standard, the language used in council chambers. That alone suggested extensive contact with galactic civilization. But the council's own monitoring stations had reported no such contact. "Admiral Cole," Thros replied, emphasizing the human's military title with barely concealed contempt. "I am Fleet Commander Thros of the Zrathi Imperial Navy. This system has been legally claimed by the Zrathi Empire under Galactic Council protocols. Your world has been designated as unclaimed territory. I recommend you surrender peacefully." The human's expression didn't change. "We are aware of the Council's decision. We are also aware that the Council made that decision without consulting us, without any diplomatic contact, and without any understanding of our actual capabilities. That was their first mistake. Your second mistake was entering our system. You now have 29 minutes to leave." Thros felt his anger rising. No primitive species had ever spoken to him with such confidence. "You speak boldly for someone whose civilization has no representation on the Galactic Council. We have monitored your world for 200 years. We know exactly what you're capable of. You have 3 vessels. I have 47. Your mathematics should tell you how this ends." Admiral Cole leaned forward slightly. "Commander, I'm going to explain something to you, and I suggest you listen carefully. For 200 years, we've been watching the galaxy. We've intercepted your communications, studied your technology, and learned your tactics. We noticed something interesting. The civilizations that broadcast the loudest are usually the ones that get attacked first, so we made a choice. We kept listening, but we stopped talking." The human paused, letting his words sink in. "While you were monitoring our radio signals and primitive space probes, we were building a navy. While your council was debating whether to classify us as unclaimed territory, we were mining asteroids and constructing shipyards on the far side of our moon. While you were assuming we were defenseless, we were preparing for exactly this scenario." Thros studied the human on his screen. The being showed no fear, no uncertainty. It was the confidence of someone who held better cards than their opponent realized. The fleet commander pulled up tactical data on his private display. 3 human vessels against 47 Zrathi warships. The numbers still favored him overwhelmingly. "A brave speech, Admiral," Thros said coldly, "but 3 ships cannot defeat a fleet. I will give you one final chance to surrender. Power down your vessels and prepare to be boarded." Admiral Cole's expression hardened. "You misunderstand, Commander. I didn't say we have 3 ships. I said you can see 3 ships. The UN's Indomitable Will, the UN's Unbroken Dawn, and the UN's Final Answer. Those are our Dreadnought-class vessels, designed specifically for situations like this, but they're not alone." As Cole spoke, 32 more gravitational signatures appeared on the Zrathi sensors, smaller than the Dreadnoughts but still substantial. They materialized from the darkness like hunting predators, cruisers, destroyers, and what appeared to be carrier vessels. Each one had been running dark, invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Thros stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans hadn't built a small defense force. They had built a fleet. A substantial, organized, modern fleet that used stealth technology beyond anything the Zrathi possessed. Admiral Cole's voice cut through Thros's shock. "You now have 25 minutes to leave our system, Commander. I strongly suggest you use them." Thros cut the communication and turned to his bridge crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. He looked at the tactical display one more time. 35 human vessels now showed on sensors. But if they had hidden that many, how many more might still be lurking in the darkness? The fleet commander felt something he had never experienced in a colonization mission before. Doubt. He pushed the feeling aside and straightened in his command chair. "All ships, weapons free. Prepare to engage the enemy." The Zrathi fleet opened fire first. 47 warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously, and space lit up with destruction. Plasma lances crossed the darkness at near light speed, their superheated energy capable of melting through meters of standard armor plating. Missile swarms launched from every vessel, hundreds of guided weapons programmed to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer numbers. The barrage was devastating, the kind of opening salvo that had broken dozens of primitive civilizations. The human fleet did not scatter. They did not try to evade. They simply continued forward on their original course, maintaining perfect formation as death raced toward them. On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, Admiral Marcus Cole watched the incoming fire with calm professionalism. His weapons officer called out impact warnings, but Cole simply nodded. This was the moment humanity's entire naval doctrine had been designed for, the moment when enemies would learn that humans didn't build ships to dance among the stars. They built ships to endure. The first plasma lances struck the Indomitable Will's forward armor. The superheated energy splashed across the hull, creating brilliant flashes of light that lit up the darkness. The ship's external temperature spiked dramatically as heat bled off into space, but beneath the incandescent fury the armor held. Composite plating layered with ablative materials, heat sinks, and structural reinforcement absorbed the impact. The outer layers melted and boiled away, but that was exactly what they were designed to do. Each layer carried away energy, dissipating the attack. The missile swarm arrived seconds later. Point defense systems on the human vessels finally came to life, targeting lasers and rapid-fire kinetic weapons shredding dozens of incoming warheads. But the Zrathi had launched too many missiles for even sophisticated defense systems to stop them all. Hundreds of warheads detonated against the human fleet's armor, some nuclear, others antimatter-based. The explosions created miniature suns that bloomed and faded in the void. Commander Thros watched the impacts on his tactical display with satisfaction. No vessels could survive that kind of punishment. The humans had been brave but foolish, refusing to maneuver and allowing his fleet to land a perfect alpha strike. He waited for the energy signatures to fade, expecting to see debris fields where the human vessels had been. Instead, the 3 dreadnoughts emerged from the dissipating explosions, still maintaining formation. Their armor was scorched and pitted. Sections of outer plating had been blasted away, and they were venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. But they were intact, still moving, and very much still combat capable. Thros felt his confidence waver. That was impossible. His fleet had just delivered enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Those ships should be nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. Admiral Cole's voice came over the open communications channel, broadcast so every ship in both fleets could hear. "Commander Thros, you've just demonstrated why your doctrine fails against human vessels. You build ships that rely on shields and maneuverability, We build ships that can take a hit and return fire. Now let us show you our doctrine. The Indomitable Will's main batteries opened fire. Railguns designed to accelerate tungsten rods to 15% of light speed discharged with tremendous energy releases. The projectiles were simple, solid metal rods without explosives or guidance systems. They didn't need them. At relativistic velocities, even small objects carried devastating kinetic energy. The first rod struck a Zarathi cruiser amidships. The vessel's plasma shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons, did absolutely nothing against solid matter moving at 45,000 kilometers per second. The tungsten rod punched through the shield, through the hull and out the other side. The kinetic transfer was so violent that the cruiser literally tore itself apart, breaking into 3 large pieces that tumbled away, trailing debris and bodies. The second dreadnought, Unbroken Dawn, fired a full broadside. 20 railgun rounds launched simultaneously, creating a deadly pattern that swept through the Zarathi formation. 4 more vessels took direct hits. 1 destroyer simply vanished, converted to plasma by the kinetic impact. 2 frigates suffered catastrophic damage and went dark, their power cores destroyed. A heavy cruiser survived the initial impact, but began tumbling out of control. Its engines shattered. The final answer, true to its name, demonstrated why the humans had chosen that particular designation. The Dreadnought opened fire with its main weapon, a mass driver of truly terrifying scale. The projectile it launched was the size of a small building, accelerated to extreme velocity by magnetic coils running the entire length of the ship. When that weapon hit a Zarathi battlecruiser, the result was catastrophic. The target vessel crumpled like paper, its structure unable to withstand the forces involved. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as power systems overloaded and ammunition cooked off. In less than 3 minutes of combat, the Zarathi fleet had lost 8 vessels. Thros stared at his tactical display in horror. His carefully organized formation was dissolving into chaos. Ships were breaking formation, trying to find range where they could engage without being in the direct line of fire from those monster railguns. The human cruisers and destroyers joined the battle. They were faster than the dreadnoughts, spreading out to engage targets across the Zarathi formation. Their weapons were smaller but no less effective. They fired in coordinated patterns, multiple ships targeting single enemy vessels to overwhelm their defenses. A Zarathi destroyer took 3 railgun hits within 2 seconds and broke apart. A frigate attempted to evade but ran directly into fire from a human cruiser and was bisected. What terrified Thros most was how the humans fought. They didn't dodge or weave. They selected targets close to optimal firing range and systematically destroyed them. When they took damage, they simply absorbed it and kept fighting. A human destroyer lost its entire bow section to a plasma lance hit, but continued firing its aft weapons until a second hit finally disabled it. Even then, it didn't explode. The crew apparently sealed the damaged sections and prepared for boarding actions. The Zarathi had never encountered an enemy like this. Most species built vessels designed to avoid damage. The humans had built vessels designed to endure damage and dish out worse in return. It was a fundamentally different approach to naval combat, and it was terrifyingly effective. Thros's tactical officer shouted a warning. "Commander, enemy fighters launching from carrier vessels." The fleet commander pulled up the new contact data. Human fighter craft were emerging from 2 carrier-type vessels that had hung back during the initial exchange. But these weren't the nimble interceptors common throughout the galaxy. They were massive, heavily armored gunships that looked more like flying tanks than fighters. Each one bristled with weapons and appeared to have armor plating thick enough to shrug off hits that would vaporize standard fighters. The human gunships tore into the Zarathi formation like sharks among fish. They worked in pairs, using coordinated attacks to catch enemy vessels in crossfire. A Zarathi corvette attempted to evade but found itself trapped between 2 gunships. Both humans fired simultaneously and the corvette ceased to exist. The gunships didn't even slow down, immediately moving to their next target. Thros realized with growing horror that his fleet was being systematically dismantled. In 20 minutes of combat, he had lost 23 vessels. Nearly half his fleet was either destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting. The human casualties stood at 2 destroyers disabled and 1 cruiser with moderate damage. The exchange ratio was insane. Even worse, the Zarathi crews were starting to break. Ships were falling back without orders, captains making independent decisions to withdraw rather than face those terrifying human weapons. Thros tried to rally his fleet, but his voice no longer carried the authority it once had. Fear had entered the equation, and once fear took hold of a military force, collapse followed quickly. The indomitable will fired again, its railgun sending another volley of tungsten death into the Zarathi formation. 2 more ships died, one instantly and one after a brief period of secondary explosions. Thros watched them die and finally accepted what his pride had refused to acknowledge. He was losing. The humans were winning, and if he didn't act now, his entire fleet would be destroyed. Thros opened a channel to his remaining vessels. All ships execute emergency withdrawal. Jump to rally point Sigma 7 immediately. The order was met with almost shameful relief. The surviving Zarathi vessels turned away from Earth and began charging their faster-than-light drives. But as they did, they discovered the final piece of human tactical planning. The smaller human vessels had been hurting them throughout the battle, using their positioning to drive the Zarathi fleet into a specific area of space, right into the engagement range of 6 human cruisers that had been waiting in silent ambush. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after the battle in Sol system. Representatives from 247 species filled the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, and every single one of them had reviewed the engagement data. The footage had been transmitted by automated monitoring stations, captured from multiple angles and verified by independent sources. There could be no doubt about what had happened. Ambassador Krell stood in the center of the chamber, his chitinous armor no longer gleaming. He looked diminished somehow, as if the weight of what his people had set in motion had physically reduced him. He had watched the battle recordings 17 times, and each viewing made the situation clearer. The Zarathi Empire had sent 47 warships to claim a primitive world. 29 of those vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 18 had fled the system in disorder. The humans had lost 2 ships. Council Speaker Matthias, a tall insectoid being from one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, addressed the assembly. We have all reviewed the engagement data. I will now open the floor for discussion. However, I must first address the question that everyone is thinking. How did we not know about Earth's military capabilities? The Director of Observation Operations, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Yeneth, activated his communication device. His translated voice filled the chamber. The observation posts have monitored Earth for 200 years. We have comprehensive data on their radio broadcasts, their technology development, and their space exploration efforts. Based on all available information, Earth appeared to be a civilization in the early stages of spacefaring development. They had no faster-than-light capability, no energy shields, and no antimatter technology. And yet, Speaker Matthias interrupted, they had a space navy of at least 35 vessels, including 3 Dreadnought-class warships that survived a concentrated alpha strike from a Zarathi battle fleet. How do you explain this discrepancy? Yeneth's form pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. After reviewing the engagement data, we believe the humans deliberately concealed their military development. They continued broadcasting civilian communications while conducting all military research and construction in radio silence. They built their shipyards on the far side of their moon, used laser-based communications that left no detectable signature, and employed stealth technology that rendered their vessels effectively invisible to our sensors. A representative from the Torval Consortium spoke up. Are you saying that a primitive species outsmarted the Council's observation network? Not primitive, came a new voice. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the central holographic display, transmitted via quantum link from somewhere in Sol system. She wore a dark blue uniform with silver insignia, and her expression was one of calm professionalism. The Council has made a fundamental error in classification. You observed our civilian technology and assumed that represented our total capabilities. It did not. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions, demanded explanations, and argued among themselves. Speaker Matthias eventually restored order and addressed the human directly. Admiral Chen, I presume. The Council has not authorized diplomatic contact with your species. The Council classified my homeworld as unclaimed territory without consulting us, Chen replied evenly. You authorized military action against Earth without any attempt at peaceful contact. Under those circumstances, we felt authorization was unnecessary. Krell found his voice. You speak as if you have the authority to negotiate with the Council. Your world has no representation here. You have no legal standing under galactic law. Chen's expression hardened. Commander Thross said something similar before we destroyed his fleet. Let me be very clear about something. We don't need your permission to exist. We don't need your authorization to defend ourselves, and we certainly don't need representation on a council that makes decisions about us without consulting us. Another representative stood, this one from a mammalian species called the Drex. Admiral, the council means no disrespect, but you must understand our position. The galaxy operates under established protocols. Species must reach certain technological milestones before they are granted council membership. Earth has not met those requirements. What requirements? Chen asked. Faster than light travel? We achieved that 40 years ago but kept it quiet. Antimatter power generation? We have 16 reactors currently online. Energy shield technology? We chose armor instead, as your people discovered. What other requirements do we need to meet? The Drex representative sat down, apparently unable to answer. Speaker Matthias studied the human admiral with newfound interest. You've had faster-than-light capability for 40 years? That would mean you achieved it during your planetary information age. That's remarkably fast technological progression. We had motivation, Chen said simply. When we first detected your observation post watching us, we had a choice. We could announce ourselves and hope for peaceful contact, or we could prepare for the possibility of hostile contact. We studied galactic communications and noticed a pattern. Civilizations that broadcast loudly often became targets. The quiet ones survived longer. So we made a decision. We kept broadcasting our civilian signals to make you think we were still primitive, but we went silent on everything that mattered. Ambassador Krell felt compelled to speak again. You deceived the entire Galactic Council. We protected ourselves, Chen corrected. And we were right to do so. The moment the Council designated Earth as unclaimed territory, the Zrathi sent a military fleet to conquer us. That vindicated 200 years of preparation. Speaker Matthias raised a manipulator appendage for silence. Admiral Chen, help us understand something. Your species split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. You fought devastating wars among yourselves. You damaged your own planet's ecosystem through industrial activity. By all observations, humanity appeared to be a violent, short-sighted species. Why should the Council believe you won't be a threat to galactic stability? Chen was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made the entire chamber listen. You watched us split the atom and asked why we immediately weaponized it. Let me answer that. Because we're a species that has survived every threat we've ever faced. Ice ages, predators, disease, famine, and yes, each other. We've been fighting for survival since we climbed down from the trees. That's not something to fear, Speaker Matthias. That's something to respect, she paused, letting her words settle. You want to know if we're violent? Yes, we're capable of tremendous violence when threatened. You want to know if we're short-sighted? No, we spent 200 years preparing for a threat we hoped would never come. You want to know if we're a danger to galactic stability? That depends entirely on how the galaxy treats us. The Admiral pulled up a display showing Earth's fleet. 47 vessels hung in formation around their homeworld, and the display clearly showed that more were under construction in the lunar shipyards. When the Zrathi sent 47 ships to conquer us, we made sure we had the capability to match them. That's not aggression, Council members. That's deterrence. We built one ship for every vessel they sent, and we'll continue building until we're confident that no one will make the same mistake twice. A new voice entered the discussion. It came from the gallery reserved for observing species, civilizations that attended council sessions but rarely spoke. The Vexthari were an ancient race, older than most of the current council members combined. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, and when they spoke, even the most arrogant representatives listened. The Vexthari delegate was a crystalline being that communicated through modulated light. The translation appeared as text on every display. We have seen species like humanity before. They emerged from worlds where survival required constant struggle. They developed technology rapidly because survival demanded it. They weaponize everything because threats came from all directions. These species follow one of two paths. They either destroy themselves in their own violence, or they become the galaxy's greatest defenders. The crystalline being pulsed with additional light. Earth has survived itself. They did not use their nuclear weapons to extinction. They did not destroy their ecosystem beyond recovery. They learned to cooperate despite their differences. This species has passed the test that destroys most aggressive civilizations. They have survived themselves. Speaker Matthias considered this statement carefully. What are you suggesting, Honored Elder? That the Council made a grave error, but one that can be corrected. Earth should be granted immediate protected status. No claims may be filed against their system. No military action may be authorized against them. And diplomatic channels should be opened immediately to establish formal relations. Krell protested immediately. The Vexthari suggest we reward the species that destroyed a Zrathi fleet? The Vexthari's light pulsed in what might have been amusement. No, Ambassador Krell. We suggest you recognize reality. Earth has a functioning space navy that proved capable of defeating a substantial military force. They have faster-than-light technology. They have advanced weapon systems. And most importantly, they have demonstrated the will to 3 months after the battle in Sol system. The Galactic Council chamber looked very different. A new seat had been installed in the assembly, marked with the symbol of Earth. It remained empty for now, as humanity continued to debate whether they wanted representation in a body that had recently tried to authorize their conquest. But the empty chair sent its own message. Earth existed, Earth was powerful, and Earth could no longer be ignored. Ambassador Krell stood before his fellow Zrathi in a private chamber, preparing his final report to the Empire. The battle had cost him everything. His political career was finished, his family name dishonored, and the Zrathi expansion had ground to a halt. Other species now looked at the Zrathi with suspicion, wondering if they too might have been targeted had Earth not stopped the colonization fleet. The report was simple and humiliating. The Zrathi Empire formally withdrew all claims to Sol system. They agreed to pay reparations for the attack, though the humans had oddly requested medical supplies and scientific information rather than territory or resources. Most painful of all, the Zrathi acknowledged that they had grossly underestimated Earth's capabilities and apologized for the unprovoked military action. Krell sealed the report and transmitted it to the Imperial Council. Then he sat alone in the darkened chamber, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. 3 months ago, the Zrathi had been an expanding power with ambitions of becoming a major galactic player. Now they were a cautionary tale, the species that had tested Earth and lost. Across the galaxy, other civilizations were rapidly revising their assessments of humanity. Intelligence agencies that had ignored Earth for centuries now devoted substantial resources to understanding them. Military planners studied the battle recordings, trying to understand human tactical doctrine. Diplomats prepared briefings on human culture, psychology, and negotiating style. Some species saw opportunity. The Varan Collective sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth proposing a trade agreement. The humans had raw materials and needed advanced technology. The Varan had technology and needed resources. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement, and after careful negotiation, Earth signed its first interstellar treaty. Other species saw threat. The Koltar Dominion, a militaristic civilization with territorial disputes against several neighbors, began a crash program to develop weapons similar to the human railguns. They had watched Earth's kinetic weapons tear through Zrathi's shields and armor, and they wanted that capability for themselves. Several other military powers did the same, setting off a small arms race in certain sectors of the galaxy. But most species simply watched and waited, trying to understand what humanity's emergence would mean for the established galactic order. The Vexthari had been right about one thing. Species that survived themselves often became defenders of peace, having learned the true cost of war through bitter experience. But whether humanity would follow that path remained to be seen. On Earth, the debate about galactic involvement consumed political discussion. Some argued for immediate council membership, believing that humanity needed a voice in galactic affairs to prevent future misunderstandings. Others advocated for continued isolation, pointing out that the council had proven itself untrustworthy. Still others proposed a middle path: engagement without membership, maintaining Earth's independence while building relationships with trustworthy species. Admiral Sarah Chen sat in her office at Earth Naval Command, located deep inside the lunar military complex. Before her, holographic displays showed the current disposition of the Earth fleet. 47 combat vessels were operational, with another 30 under construction. The shipyards had expanded dramatically since the battle, and construction timelines had accelerated. Within 2 years, Earth would have over 100 military vessels, a fleet that would make them a significant power by any galactic standard. A knock at her door interrupted her review. "Come in," she called, and Admiral Marcus Cole entered. He looked tired but satisfied, having just returned from a diplomatic mission to the Varan homeworld. "How did it go?" Chen asked. Cole settled into a chair and grinned. "Better than expected. The Varan are genuinely interested in partnership, not domination. They were impressed that we asked for medical technology and educational materials as reparations from the Zerathi instead of territory or weapons. Apparently, most species would have demanded strategic assets. Most species didn't just prove they could defend their strategic assets," Chen replied. "We don't need the Zerathi's territory. We need to improve our medical technology and understand galactic science better. That's worth more than a few star systems we don't have the population to settle anyway." Cole nodded agreement. The Varan also mentioned something interesting. Several species have approached them asking about Earth's intentions. Everyone wants to know if we're planning to expand aggressively or if we're content with defending Sol System. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our own system. We're not interested in conquest or colonization, but we will defend ourselves and any allies we make with overwhelming force if necessary." Chen considered this. "Did they believe you?" "I think so." The Varan diplomat said something that stuck with me. He said that species which have known real war rarely seek it out afterward. They understand the cost too well. He thinks humanity will be a stabilizing force in the galaxy, because we know what destruction looks like. The Admiral pulled up a new display, showing a political map of the local galactic sector. Dozens of species, hundreds of star systems, and countless competing interests all jostling for position. "I hope he's right, Marcus. Because from where I'm sitting, this galaxy looks like Earth in the 20th century. Multiple powers, shifting alliances, territorial disputes, and no one with the authority to enforce peace. That's why they're afraid of us," Cole said quietly. "We're not just another minor species trying to find a place in the existing order. We're a completely new factor with unknown intentions and proven military capability. That makes us unpredictable, and unpredictability frightens established powers." Chen stood and walked to the window. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see Earth hanging in the black sky, a blue and white marble that held 8 billion humans. Behind her, Cole waited silently, understanding that his superior was working through something important. Finally, Chen spoke. "We're going to accept the council seat." Cole looked surprised. "The general staff voted against that last week. I know. But I've been thinking about the Vexthari's statement. Species like us either destroy themselves or become defenders. We've proven we won't destroy ourselves. That means we have a responsibility to be the second thing. And we can't defend anything if we're isolated and alone." She turned to face him. "The galaxy isn't going to leave us alone, Marcus. The Zerathi proved that. If we isolate ourselves, we'll just be reacting to threats as they appear. But if we engage, if we build alliances and establish relationships, we can shape the environment around us. We can prevent conflicts rather than just responding to them." Cole thought about this for a moment. "You're talking about becoming a galactic power." "I'm talking about surviving," Chen corrected. "We spent 200 years preparing to defend Earth. Now we need to spend the next 200 years ensuring we never have to defend it again. That means diplomacy, alliances, and yes, maintaining a military that makes potential aggressors think twice." The Admiral pulled up another display, this one showing the locations of the 3 Dreadnoughts. The Indomitable Will, Unbroken Dawn, and Final Answer hung in orbit around Earth, silent guardians that had proven their worth in battle. "These ships bought us a seat at the table. Now we need to decide what we're going to do with it." Cole stood and moved to join her at the window. "You know that half the council fears us and the other half wants to use us, right?" "I do, and they're going to learn something about humanity that the Zerathi learned the hard way. We don't let ourselves be used and we don't back down from threats, but we're also willing to be friends with anyone who approaches us honestly. The galaxy needs to understand that we're not interested in their games. We're interested in survival, growth, and peace, in that order." Far across the galaxy in the observation post beyond Pluto's orbit, Commander Voran reviewed the latest data from Earth. The planet was no longer broadcasting chaotic civilian signals mixed with military tests. Instead, there were structured communications, diplomatic channels, and organized traffic between Earth and several other species. The humans were engaging with the galaxy but on their own terms. Vorin updated his files with a new classification. Earth was no longer listed as a primitive world under observation. The new designation read, Major Power, handle with diplomatic caution. On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, Captain Rachel Torres stood watch as her crew ran system checks. The Dreadnought had been in continuous operation since the battle, and it showed. Scorched armor,